I never thought the person who would destroy my retirement would be my own son. Not a stranger. Not a scammer. Not some criminal hiding behind a computer screen. My son. The boy I had loved, protected, and sacrificed everything for. And the worst part? By the time I discovered what he had done, nearly every dollar I had spent 35 years saving was already gone. My name is Linda Carter. I am 63 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. For most of my life, I worked as a registered nurse. The job wasn't glamorous, but it allowed me to raise my son, Ryan, after my husband passed away when Ryan was only 9 years old. Life wasn't easy. There were years when I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. There were birthdays when I couldn't afford expensive gifts. There were nights when I skipped dinner, so Ryan could have seconds. But I never complained, because every sacrifice felt worth it when I looked at my son. Ryan grew into a smart and ambitious young man. He graduated from college and eventually moved to Chicago, where he worked in marketing. I was proud of him. At least I thought I was. As I got older, I became more careful with money. I had accumulated nearly $420,000 in retirement savings over the years. It wasn't enough to live lavishly, but it was enough to provide security. Security mattered to me. I had seen too many elderly patients struggling financially. I promised myself I would never become a burden to anyone. Ryan knew about my retirement account. Over the years, I had occasionally mentioned it. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. About 6 months before everything fell apart, Ryan started calling more often. At first, I loved it. He would ask how I was doing. He'd tell me he missed me. Sometimes he'd even say things like, "Mom, you've done so much for me. One day I'm going to take care of you." Hearing those words filled my heart. I had no idea they were setting the stage for the biggest betrayal of my life. One afternoon, Ryan called sounding stressed. He explained that he was dealing with some financial issues. A business investment hadn't worked out, and he needed temporary help. I felt concerned. "How much do you need?" I asked. "Nothing right now," he replied quickly. "I just wanted someone to talk to." Looking back, that conversation chills me. Because now I know he wasn't looking for advice. He was gathering information. A few weeks later, strange things started happening. Letters from my bank stopped arriving. Email notifications seemed to disappear. I assumed it was some technical issue. I wasn't very good with technology. Then one morning, while checking my account online, I couldn't log in. The password had changed. At first, I thought I'd forgotten it. After several failed attempts, I called the bank. What happened next turned my blood cold. The representative asked me if I had recently authorized multiple large transfers. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my hand started shaking. "What transfers?" I asked. There was a long pause. Then she told me an amount I will never forget. Over $380,000 had been withdrawn from my retirement savings over the previous months. My entire body went numb. I thought there had to be some mistake, some kind of fraud, some misunderstanding. But I was about to learn a truth far worse than anything I could have imagined. And the name connected to those transactions was someone I trusted more than anyone else in the world. My son, Ryan. The moment I heard that, my life changed forever. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I sat frozen at my kitchen table while the bank representative continued speaking, but her words sounded distant, like they were coming from another room. All I could think was, "No, not Ryan. Anyone but Ryan." "There must be a mistake," I whispered. The representative explained that someone had successfully accessed my online account months earlier. Security settings had been changed. New contact information had been added. Verification codes had been sent to a different phone number. A phone number registered to Ryan. The room spun around me. I hung up and immediately called him. No answer. I called again, and again, and again. Nothing. By evening, I had left 12 voicemail messages. My anxiety turned into fear. Then fear became anger. The next morning, Ryan finally called back. His voice sounded calm. Too calm. "Mom, what's going on?" I nearly dropped the phone. "What's going on?" I shouted. "The bank says someone emptied my retirement account." There was silence. A long, uncomfortable silence. And in that silence, I knew. Before he even spoke, I knew.
Finally, Ryan sighed.
Mom, I can explain. Those 4 words shattered whatever hope I still had. My heart sank. Tell me I didn't hear your name from the bank. Another pause. Then he said something I will never forget. I was going to pay it back. Not I didn't do it. Not there must be a mistake. Not even an apology. Just, I was going to pay it back. I felt physically sick. Ryan admitted everything. Months earlier, he had gotten involved in a real estate investment opportunity through a friend. The investment promised huge returns. At first, he invested his own money. Then, he borrowed more. Then even more. When things started collapsing, he panicked. Instead of accepting the loss, he became desperate. Desperate people make dangerous decisions. One day, while helping me set up online banking months before, Ryan had quietly saved information about my account. Information he later used to gain access.
Piece by piece.
Transfer by transfer. He stole nearly everything. My retirement. My safety. My future. Everything. As he talked, I realized something even more painful. This wasn't one bad decision. This had taken planning. Weeks. Months. Every transfer required a choice. Every login required a decision. Again and again, he chose himself over me. When I started crying, Ryan became defensive. Mom, you don't understand how much pressure I was under. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pressure? I spent decades working night shifts. I buried my husband. I raised him alone. I sacrificed vacations, hobbies, relationships, and dreams. And now he wanted sympathy? Did you ever think about what would happen to me? I asked. He didn't answer. Because there was no answer. 3 days later, I flew to Chicago. I needed to look him in the eye. When I arrived at his apartment, I barely recognized him. The confident son I remembered was gone. He looked exhausted,
Stressed. Broken.
but instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt grief. Because no matter what he had done, he was still my child. When I entered the apartment, I noticed expensive furniture, luxury electronics, designer items. My stolen future was sitting all around me. The confrontation lasted hours. Ryan admitted the investment had completely failed. The money was gone. Almost all of it. Less than $20,000 remained. Everything else had vanished. That was the moment I truly understood the damage. This wasn't a problem that could be fixed with a repayment plan. My retirement savings were gone. Gone forever. And as I left his apartment that evening, Ryan shouted something that cut deeper than the theft itself. If you report me, you'll ruin my life. I stopped walking, slowly turned around, and realized something shocking. He still believed he was the victim. But what Ryan didn't know was that life was about to teach him a lesson far harsher than anything I ever could. A lesson called karma. And it was already on its way. As I boarded my flight back to Columbus, I felt completely empty. For weeks, I barely slept. Every morning I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare. Every morning reality hit me all over again. My son had stolen the money I spent 35 years earning. The money that was supposed to carry me through retirement. Friends encouraged me to contact the police. Some told me to sue him. Others said I should cut him out of my life forever. But none of those decisions felt easy. Ryan wasn't just a thief.
He was my son.
The little boy whose scraped knees I bandaged. The teenager whose graduation made me cry. The young man I once believed would make me proud. Reporting him felt like reporting a part of myself. But something inside me finally changed. One evening I sat alone looking through old family photographs. Picture after picture reminded me of every sacrifice I had made. Then a thought hit me. If Ryan could make a choice, then so could I. And I chose to protect myself. The next morning I filed an official fraud report. I provided every document, every bank record, and every piece of evidence. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done. A few days later Ryan called. For the first time, he sounded scared. Really scared. Word had spread. Investigators were asking questions. His employer had learned about the situation. The investment scheme he had joined was also being investigated. Things were unraveling fast. "Mom, please," he begged. "We can work this out." But where had that concern been when he was transferring my money? Where had that concern been when he watched my savings disappear? For months, Ryan had believed he was smarter than everyone else. Now reality was catching up.
And it wasn't finished.
Within weeks, his company terminated his employment. The ongoing investigation made him a liability. Several business associates cut ties with him. Friends who once admired his success disappeared almost overnight. The life he had built using lies began collapsing around him. But the biggest consequence wasn't financial. It was loneliness. For the first time, Ryan experienced what betrayal actually felt like. Months passed. Then one day I received an unexpected phone call. It was Ryan. His voice sounded different. Humbled. Broken. Human. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming anyone else. Instead, he cried. Actually cried. "Mom," he said, "I finally understand what I did to you." I remained silent. He continued. "When everyone walked away from me, I realized that's exactly what I did to you." For the first time since the theft, I believed he was telling the truth. Not because of his words, because of the pain behind them. Karma had finally arrived. Not in the form of revenge. Not through prison bars or public humiliation. But through understanding. The very thing Ryan lacked when he stole from me. Over the next 2 years, he worked relentlessly. He sold his luxury belongings. Took extra jobs. Moved into a small apartment. Every month he sent money toward repayment. The amount wasn't large, but it was consistent. More importantly, it was earned honestly. Our relationship healed slowly. Trust doesn't return overnight. Sometimes it doesn't return completely. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I eventually forgave him. Not because he deserved it. Because I deserved peace. Today, at 65 years old, my retirement looks very different from what I once imagined. I live more modestly. I budget carefully. And I no longer assume that love automatically guarantees loyalty. But I also learned something powerful. Money can be stolen. Security can disappear. Plans can fall apart. Yet strength, dignity, and self-respect remain yours unless you surrender them. Ryan once stole my retirement savings. But he never succeeded in stealing who I am. And in the end, karma taught him a lesson no parent ever could. The price of betrayal is eventually paid by the person who commits it. Sometimes later. Sometimes unexpectedly. But always eventually. The day my son stole my future, I thought my life was over. I was wrong. It was simply the beginning of a new chapter. One where I finally learned that even after the deepest betrayal, it is possible to survive, rebuild, and move forward.